Welcome to our next video over the cost of credit. And look, there's no lag. Hallelujah. They came and fixed my document camera. I'm so excited. Okay, without further ado, here we go. Credit is the money that you borrow based on the expectation that you will repay the amount in the future, sometimes with added fees and/or interest. Interest associated with credit refers to the charge for the privilege of borrowing money. In the space below, list some common reasons people may use credit. Now, let's talk about credit for just a second. Credit is an amount of money that is lended to you that you can spend, but when it comes to the repayment process, they usually tack on something called interest. Now, we've been calculating interest in different ways, so we should be a little familiar with what interest is at this point. It is the extra money on top of something that you either borrowed or originally paid. So how credit institutions make their money is they charge this thing called interest, because obviously if they constantly just lend money out without adding anything extra to it, they're not also making money. So it's just like a trade. Everyone has to make money somehow, and that's how credit institutions make their money. So when credit is used is if you have a credit card, for example, or in the adult world, whenever you want to make like a really big purchase. So if we were in class talking about this, we would talk about some really big things that might happen as an adult. So one of the really big ones is buying, if I can spell, there we go, buying a car. Or another really big one is actually buying a house. Now, when you use credit for these big purchases, what that means is like not everyone has hundreds of thousands of dollars laying around in their bank accounts. So when you get stuck in a predicament where you need to buy a house, you have to go to a bank and say, I would like to borrow X amount of money so that I can purchase this house. And that is where credit comes in. Okay, so with that, it says it is important to understand that when using credit, you may end up repaying more than you originally borrowed because of interest. If I can spell, y'all, I just forgot how to spell interest for a second there. There we go. Now, I kind of gave you a visual of what that looks like. So here is the amount borrowed, but then here's the amount repaid, and you can see there's that little bit extra right there. Okay, so now let's talk about the different forms of credit. So the very first and probably the most common form of credit is a credit card. So this is issued by a bank or a business and typically has a credit limit. What I mean by credit limit is whenever you take out a credit card, they start you off, most cards start with about a $500 to $1,000 limit. What that means is you can spend up to that amount, but you're not allowed to exceed that amount. It will start to decline that card. Now, when it comes to the repayment process, a minimum payment is the smallest amount a consumer should pay each month in order to avoid late fees and maintain a good credit history. One second. Sorry about that. I guess y'all can see that I'm still at the school. So, anyways, back to what I was saying. A minimum payment is the smallest amount a consumer should pay each month in order to avoid late fees and maintain a good credit history. Although a minimum payment is an option. Don't get me wrong. If you're in a rough spot and you can only make a minimum payment, do it. However, it is not the best to always just make the minimum payment, and here's why. Number one, it takes longer for you to pay back what you borrowed, because if you're only paying the minimum, what that means is, yes, you're making monthly payments. However, they are getting to tack on more interest. And interest is charged on any monthly balances that are not paid off. So when you make the minimum payments, they are able to tack on interest at the end of each payment, which at the end just makes it longer and more difficult for you to pay off your credit card. So whenever you get older and you take out your own cards, it's smarter every month to pay the statement balance instead. Now, again, like I said before, if you get in a rut and you're not able to pay the statement balance, that's why the minimum payment is there, to keep your credit score good, but then also make it to where you are still making your payments. So again, credit cards can be tricky, but they also can be very, very helpful as well. So I don't want you to ever be scared of taking out a credit card. Just make sure that you're doing it the smart way. Okay? Next one's personal loans. This allows a borrower to make larger purchases and usually has a fixed term or length of time that the borrower will have to repay the loan. So for example, when you buy a house, they have, I believe it's 15, 25, and 30-year loans that have what's called a fixed rate. And what that means is they're not allowed to increase or decrease your interest rate. You're stuck to that interest rate that they give you. Therefore, they're not allowed to change it on you. Okay, so you're going to pay the same thing every single month, and you never have to worry about it going higher or lower unless you make extra payments, which is another conversation for another day. So the good thing about personal loans is that they're fixed, and we like that they're fixed because with a credit card, your payment can vary depending on how much you spend, whereas on a personal loan, you know how much to budget each month. Then the last one, easy access loans. This is typically a very short term and has high interest. They are generally the quickest way to access funds when necessary. So easy access loans are for your stores around town, like the cash store. Anytime you see a cash store, those are your easy access loans where they are able to hand you money that day, but you end up paying a lot in interest, almost doubling what you borrowed versus what you paid back. So I would not recommend easy access loans because they can get super tricky. It would be better to do a credit card or a personal loan, because personal loans are financed typically through a bank, which not dogging any other company, they're just a little bit more trustworthy with what you're going to be repaying. So that's just my personal opinion. This is a very real world concept that I highly recommend talking to your families about and kind of getting some insight on different routes that they've taken before. But don't ever get too nosy. Some things aren't your business. All right, number 1, Peter takes out a $26,000 loan in order to buy a new car. He qualifies for a 4.1% interest rate, and his loan is a 5-year term with monthly payments of $480. Now, I want you to notice all of the things are there. You have a principal amount, you have a percentage, you have years. However, it does not say simple or compound. That is because this is not simple and compound interest. If it wanted you to solve it using those methods, it would have explicitly said simple and compound interest. This is just you being able to calculate real world concepts. So we're going to go through the questions and see what they're asking for. It says, how many months will Peter be making payments for his car? So let's go back to our question and get some important information. Peter takes out a $26,000 loan in order to buy a new car. He qualifies for a 4.11% interest rate, and his loan is a 5-year term with monthly payments of $480. So the length of time is written in years. It is a 5-year loan. However, the question wants to know about how many months will he pay. Well, I know that 5 years, I'm turning my calculator here. I know that 5 years, let me change my color, times 12, because there are 12 months in a year, will tell me how many months Peter is going to take on that loan. And in this case, it is 60 months. So that is the difference between simple compound and what we're doing now. Now I'm actually getting to like the nitty gritty of what am I going to be paying and for how long. So anytime you need to convert years to months, you just multiply by 12 because again there's 12 months in a year. B says use the term and Peter's monthly payments to find the total cost of repayment. So term, let me highlight that real quick. Term is the length of time that you spend making payments on a certain loan. And then it says, and Peter's monthly payments. So, because it specifically says monthly, my term, I'm not going to write it in years. I'm actually going to use this 60 that we just calculated in step A. And then I need to figure out how much he is going to pay. So I know that the term is 60. His monthly payments, let's go back and see if we can find that. Takes out $26,000 loan, 4.11% interest, 5 years, monthly payments. Oh, there it is, $480. Perfect. So in class, we kind of have some discussions of how I can calculate, well, if I'm paying $480 for 60 months, what operation would I do to figure out the total I would pay? And we would come up with multiply, because I don't want to add 480 60 times. I would much rather multiply that out because I can type that in, 60 times 480. And I get, and we are talking about money here. You want to use the correct format, $28,800. Now, before I move on to the last thing, I want you to look what just happened. He is going to pay for 60 months, $480 each of those months. But notice, his amount that he paid is more than what he initially borrowed. Is the total repayment more or less than the original amount Peter borrowed? It is more. Now, the reason it's more, we would kind of have this discussion again in class. Why is it more? The reason that it's more is because that's what he started with, but this interest rate caused the bank to add 4.11% extra onto his principal. So whenever you're deciding why is it more, it's more because of interest. And again, the more months you pay, the more you pay in interest, and that is how the banks make their money. On to my second page here, number 2. There we go. It says that Jill paid for a $1,200 vacation by using a credit card with an 18% interest rate. In order to pay the card off in 12 months, Jill will need to make payments of $110.02 each month. Calculate the total cost of repayment as well as the amount in interest Jill will pay. Whoa, that's like a lot of words. So let's go back and get some important details here. Jill paid for a $1,200 vacation by using a credit card with an 18% interest rate. In order to pay the card off in 12 months, Jill will need to make payments of $110 each month. Calculate the total cost of repayment as well as the amount of interest Jill will pay. Now, here's the part that gets kind of tricky. We get all of these numbers and we start to think, oh, I have to use every single one of them. That's not always true, especially in these types of instances. Right here, it does tell me how much she originally borrowed, how much the interest is, and how long. However, it does say that she'll need to make payments of $110.02. That is their way of letting you know we've already calculated everything for you involving this interest rate. You just need to know that that's how much money you are going to spend each month. Now, to figure out a total, I need to know how long I'm going to be paying $110.02. So I know I have $110.02, and I'm paying it in monthly installments because it says each month right here. So to figure out a total repayment, I need to multiply that dollar amount by the length of time I'm going to be paying it, which they said very explicitly, 12 months. And lucky for you, we have a little calculator over here. Clear that out. That'll do that computation for me. 110.2. Oh, one moment. I'm going to turn my lights back on. Sorry about that. $110.02 times 12. And notice that amount becomes more than what I originally borrowed. Therefore, that's a total $1,320.24. Okay, great. Now, in class, I would ask you, is this number larger than what you originally started with? And hopefully you'll be able to tell me it's larger. If not, we might need to talk about some money here. But it is larger because that is a total. This next part wants me to calculate how much did they pay in interest. Guys, it is so important for you to know how much extra you're going to be paying. So if you can figure out how to calculate that now, when you get into adult world, your life's going to be a lot easier because you can go, oh, that's not the deal for me. Okay, so with that, I know that $1,320.24 will be my grand total at the end. So whenever I want to calculate, how much did the institution just make off of me? I subtract out what I originally borrowed. And that gets me the amount of money that I paid extra, which of course in this case does not look that bad, but think about it. $120.24, that's like a pair of dunks. I mean, depends on the dunks that you get. Okay, so keep that in mind. You always want to make sure that your interest rate is something that is not super crazy. Okay, on number 3, I want you to pause the video and I want you to attempt it without me. Hopefully you got an answer similar to mine. So let me just backtrack and kind of talk about what this problem did. So here it says Brady has a $20,000 in student loans with a 3.3% interest that he plans to pay off in 5 years. He will need to make monthly payments of $362.05. Find the total cost of repayment as well as the amount of interest that Brady will pay. Now, it said monthly payments, but it gave me it in years. To turn years into months, you multiply by 12. That was a 60-month amount of repayment that he's going to do. Now, his monthly payments were done for you, $362.05. To figure out a total repayment, I multiply my two numbers to get my grand total. Now, hopefully you noticed that that is not how much he originally borrowed, but it is how much he's going to repay. So the institution that he borrowed from earned $1,723 off of him simply just borrowing money from him. So as you can tell, the lower the interest rate, the better off you are. And that's always what your goal is. Whenever you go to a car dealership, whenever you go to a bank for your house, you want the lowest possible interest rate so that way you're not paying them as much and you're getting to keep that money in your pocket. Okay? So number 4 says Donna is applying for a personal loan of $5,000 with a 5-year term to help furnish her new home. The table shows Donna's potential monthly payments based on the interest rate that she qualifies for. Complete the table and compare the total repayment and interest paid for each rate. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me do all of these, but I do want to talk about this. This is just you trying to decide what is a better option. So it gave us our loan. We wanted a $5,000 loan, and these are the different rates that she qualified for. Okay? Then it said that every term is 5 years, and then it gives out what her monthly installments would be. So I'm going to calculate the first one with you. So her monthly payments are $92.08. However, these are not in months. So that would be my first thing I would do. So I would convert all of those to months, and to do that, you simply multiply by 12. And because these are all the same, clear this out. 5 years times 12 months is 60 months. 60 months. And again, the reason we're having to do that is because she's not making yearly payments. She's making monthly payments. So now her total repayment, well, for her first one, it calculated these two things for me to get me my monthly. So to get my total repayment, I do this $92.08 times 60. Let's do that in our calculator. $2.08 times 60. And I get 5,000. Make sure you put your dollar sign. Don't mess up that format. $5,524. Do not just tell me and 8. No, we're talking about money. You don't want no one playing with your money. That's 80 cents. You always go out 2 decimal places. Now, obviously, the amount that she repaid versus the amount she borrowed is different. That means that there was interest tacked on at the very end, so we're going to calculate that as well. $5,524.80 minus the 5,000 to get the interest amount, which is $524.80. Okay, I want you to pause the video and I want you to do the other two without me. Okay, hopefully your table looks like mine. All we did was multiply the amount of monthly payments times the months that she's gonna be paying, and then we subtracted to get just how much interest. So hopefully, as you can see, that the higher the interest rate went up, the more the bank made off of you. How you keep your interest rate low is you make your payments on time and you keep a good credit score. So the summarization is the higher the rate, the higher the amount of repayment. Now, table 5, I'm gonna talk about it and then you're gonna do it without me. It does say he's taking out a $32,000 loan with a 4.2% interest for a new SUV. And then it says the table shows Joseph's monthly car payments based on the terms of the loan. Complete the table to compare the total repayment. Now, it calculated the loan, it calculated the rate. The terms are in years, but it's in monthly payments. So that would be step 1. And I'm gonna do this color. I want you to notice that the years are not the same here. So we're gonna multiply by 12, but I cannot put an overall 60 like I did up here. I have to calculate each one of these individually. So then my monthly payments, I have to multiply how long versus how much. What is my total repayment, and then subtract to get my interest. I want you to attempt this entire table without me. Pause your video and attempt now. Okay, hopefully your table looks similar to mine. Now the first thing you should have noticed is that the first one was 12 months, the second one was 36, and then the third one was 60. Then when you multiply those out, yes, you got higher amounts, but then I want you to look over here at the interest paid. So it says summarize the effect of the length of the term and the cost of the credit. So you had a fixed interest rate here. It was still 4.2%. So on this one, because we had it for longer, every time the years went up, the amount also went up. So on this one, the longer the term, the higher your repayment. So these are all based on circumstance, like what are they trying to give you? Is it the same rate overall? Is it a different rate for each amount of time? But what's important for you to know is that we've got to make sure we're making the right kind of payments. Is it monthly or is it yearly? If it's monthly, you can easily convert years to months by just multiplying by 12 and then actually crunching the numbers to see how much money are you putting in your pocket. Okay, hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helps. Bye.